This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest General Walter Givan, who has been a Vice Chancellor here at Troy University for a little over a year now. Walter, good to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Steve. I appreciate the invitation.
Walter and I have become good friends since he's arrived in Troy. He has been a marvelous asset to the university and to our community here in Troy. But he's had an illustrious career prior to being here at the university. He looks like a young man. He's pretty young. He's not much younger than me, though. He served 33 years, y'all, as a United States Air Force officer and pilot. 33 years in the United States Air Force. He is retired as a regular general, a full general in the United States Air Force. So we're fortunate to have such an illustrious military veteran, career person here at the university and here in our town of Troy. And like I say, he's been a great asset. Walter is also an icon from the state's, one of the state's greatest political families, the Givhans over in Dallas County, and we'll talk about some of that tonight, and talk about Walter's young growing up years with his grandfather, who was the great Walter Givan, who he's named for, who was a famous state senator from over in Dallas County. And Walter, tell our folks now, your wife's from the Black Belt too, isn't she? You think it's the mop?
Greenville, actually.
Greenville, that's part of Black Belt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really interesting. We met when we were at Swanee.
She was at Swanee.
Right, but it's a small world story because we had never met before, but you know how Southerners will eventually draw out the connections, and we discovered that my cousin was her brother's godfather. So there was a connection anyway, yes.
Do y'all ever get over to Greenville?
Oh yeah, my wife still has her family farm over just north of Greenville, and we have a little cottage on that farm.
I don't know if sometime you ought to go in this. I had a book signing at the High Horse Gallery.
Yeah.
That is an amazing, have y'all been in there?
Great asset to the community.
It really is. I mean, I walked in and they wanted to host the book signing. It is like an art place out of New York or Atlanta.
Yeah, I love it. Just as I've loved to see what we've done in downtown Troy
with our Johnson Art Center.
The Johnson Art Center. It's great to see that Main Street in Greenville with places like the High Horse Gallery popping up on it.
And she was born and raised there in Butler County, in the northern part of the county. Now, I bet there weren't many Alabamans at Swanee that time. Y'all went, but she grew up an Episcopalian like you?
Yes, in fact, her father was an Episcopal minister, and in fact, he was in Rome, Georgia, by the time she went to Swanee. But Greenville has always been home for that family, the Belans, and it was
her father. She was the probate judge. Belan?
All those Belans, yeah, right there.
She's a Belan.
Yeah, she's a Belan.
And you're a Givan, two of the great political names. I did not know that Judge Belan was a great probate judge of Butler County.
No, that's her family.
Well, I'll be dog. Y'all really do have a lot in common. Two great Black Belt families with fantastic political heritage.
Well, having things in common makes it easy when you're falling in love, and she's a wonderful woman.
And her family was. Did the Episcopal priests move around a lot like
they did?
Like
it's not unlike being in the military to a certain degree, although the assignments changed. They moved around when she was growing up, but fortunately, most of the time before he retired, he was in Rome, Georgia, which was good, still driving distance from home, and they maintained their Butler County roots.
But her father had Butler County roots, like your family had Dallas County roots.
Oh, exactly.
Walter, that reminds me of a story. Howell Heflin's father was a Methodist minister, and the Methodist church moved their pastors around just like the Episcopalians do. And Heflin always had a sore spot because you mentioned Rome, Georgia. His father had been moved to Georgia, and Heflin was actually born over there in Georgia. And he always was ready for a reply. Someone said, he said, yeah, my daddy was over there in Georgia doing missionary work among the heathen. Among the heathen, he'd say. The Georgians were heathen.
I can hear him saying it. That's great.
He was so colorful. But anyway, that is so interesting. Did y'all start, you almost became an Episcopal priest.
Well, I certainly thought about it. I was very active in the Episcopal Church when I was in high school and in college at Swanee. And Swanee had a seminary, which was one of the reasons I went there.
School,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I thought long and hard about it, but one of the things I'd also had was a flying bug. And I'd almost gone to the Air Force Academy because of that. Well,
you could have gotten an appointment.
In fact, Walter Flowers was the congressman at the time, and actually had held an appointment for me in case I wanted to go. But I decided to go to Swanee, and I'm glad I did. But as I reached the end of my time there, I thought, I still want to fly jets for the Air Force. And I was just lucky because the Air Force needed pilots then. So I walked into a recruiter's office my last semester, and 2 weeks after I graduated, I was on active duty and spent the next 33 years in the Air Force.
Walter, what town is Swanee in?
Swanee is in Swanee. In fact,
okay.
It's officially now called Swanee, the University of the South, but it was always popularly known as Swanee because that was the name of the little town.
Nestled right there in the mountains.
Right on the edge of the Cumberland Plateau. Beautiful setting.
Yeah.
13,000 acre domain on the edge of the Cumberland Plateau. Just a gorgeous place to go to school.
Walter, so you just walked in, would you walk into a place there in Tennessee?
Yeah, I drove all the way to Chattanooga, walked in the recruiter's office, talked to them about what I wanted to do. They're always polite, but they send you off to take a test. I took the test. I did pretty well on it. And so when I came back and I gave my scores to the recruiter, he said, please come in.
Was it a mental test, or did he ask questions about flying?
It's everything. It's what we call the officer's qualifying test. So it covers everything. But then if you're interested in being a pilot, there's also a specific battery that accompanies it of questions that are directed towards your aptitude, potential aptitude as a pilot.
Where did they, when you left that place, you were a senior in college. Now, were you getting ready to get married too? No, I graduated
from Swanee, and like I said, 2 weeks later, I was on active duty in the Air Force, and I very quickly, in my second assignment, I went overseas. So I was flying fighters in Germany, and then from there went to Desert Shield.
You
and
became
Desert
a lieutenant
Storm.
right off the bat.
Yeah, you're a lieutenant, and then captain is next. So when I was a captain, I was in Europe and then in Desert Storm. And when I came back from Desert Storm, that was when I ran back into Francis.
Is that right? Y'all been out of school 4 or 5 years, I bet, hadn't you?
But a little while, yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And where'd y'all see each other?
Well, I was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, and she'd moved to Fairhope.
Where all did you serve when you were a pilot?
I had a great fortune to be able to, one of the reasons, let me preface that by saying, one of the reasons I wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force is I really wanted to get out in the world and see the world, and it certainly delivered on that. So I was in Germany, but as I was in Germany, I was going all over Europe. I was in the Middle East for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Las Vegas, Nevada at Nellis Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, Washington, D.C. I was in Washington, D.C. 4 different times doing tours there. I also spent a year in Afghanistan rebuilding the Afghan Air Force.
Walter, did you have a sense originally or even during your career, I don't know what percentage people make it to be general, which you made it to, would you feel like you were having to come up against the fact you'd gone to a liberal arts school like Swanee as opposed to being at the Air Force Academy?
Actually, I felt like having that liberal arts background worked in my favor. I was, as did coming up in a family that was involved in politics, because I had a sense for the politics things, and inevitably everything touches on politics in one way or another. My liberal arts education prepared me well for dealing with other countries. I had a good background in understanding other cultures. I spoke French. So it really prepared me for going out and doing work in Europe and then in the Middle East, already having a basis by which, a common ground to share with other cultures, because I understood them and I was curious about them. So I felt like I wasn't the typical guy, and that worked in my favor.
Going back to your childhood in Dallas County, it was a slower pace,
yes,
than you were used to being an Air Force pilot for 33 years. Tell me your first memories of your grandfather, who, as I mentioned earlier, was a very well-known veteran state senator, very powerful. Both of them from the Black Belt at that time, Senator Walter Givan from Dallas and Senator Roland Cooper from Wilcox, were two of the most powerful senators. I remember when I paged up there, they had an inordinate amount of influence, as did most of the Black Belt. You know, the Black Belt has had an inordinate power in state government since the state's inception.
Really has.
But your family goes back to prior to the Civil War, doesn't it? Oh, in Dallas County.
My family arrived in Alabama in the 1820s. We originally came over from France, Huguenots, Protestants, you know, escaping religious persecution.
And came straight, they came to Europe.
Initially went Holland and then down to the Carolinas, South Carolinas, where my family landed in the 1740s. And then as the cotton lands wore out in South Carolina, they moved down to Alabama
in the 1820s.
1820s. So been in that part of the world since then.
That land's still in your family, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I was you're asking about my grandfather. I always knew him as Papa.
Let me ask you this before that. Before Papa, the first Givan, he wasn't named Walter.
No,
the one who came in 1827.
Well, the first one that we know in South Carolina is Philip Givan, and then you have Jacob Givan. Coming down.
Is he the one who migrated to Alabama, Jacob?
Right.
And bought the land.
Right.
Developed the land over there. And
right. And there were a couple of branches.
That land almost borders Perry County, doesn't it? It's right there next to Perry.
It does. It does. It's right the western part of Dallas County with Perry County lines just a couple of miles from the center of our land.
But so Jacob came down here and then had the land. Is that Mr. Walter's father?
No,
somebody between them.
Yeah, no, there's several
before
between them. Yeah.
So Walter Van's born around the turn of the century, wasn't he?
He was 1902.
Yeah.
You know, it was funny. I always thought, you know, because I was so flying was such a big deal to me. I thought, wow, he was born 1 year before the Wright brothers flew. That always stuck in my mind.
You like planes when you were a little boy?
Oh yeah, I read every book in my school library on flying. I built model airplanes. I flew every chance. My father was also a pilot in the Army.
I didn't know that.
He 4 years active duty and then a weekend warrior in the Guard, and so he was still flying, you know, when I was growing up in the Guard.
So Mr. Walter, he grew up on that farm.
Yeah.
The state senator. Served about 25 years in the state senate.
Well, yeah, he was actually he had 6 terms in the Senate.
25 years.
And was 4 terms
in the
House prior to that. Right.
Oh, so that was a long time.
So about 38 years total in the legislature.
So he was Walter, and then your daddy was Walter. Back to my first question. What was your first memories of your grandfather? Was he a friendly old guy? Was he stern? How was he?
Well, he loved us, his grandchildren. You know, I could see him be, you know, very serious and stern with others. He was always very loving towards us. He was always a formal man. Seeing my grandfather without a tie or a coat on was unusual.
Even on a hot summer afternoon.
He would almost never took his coat and tie off, except he would come back from the legislature and he'd be rocking on the porch in the evenings, and I'd come over to sit by him and talk to him, and he'd be in his shirt sleeves then. But that was it. He didn't go down any less. That was as informal as he got.
Did you think you'd get in politics when you talked to him on the porch? You just liked the airplanes more than that, didn't you?
You know, I thought about it, and you know, politics still interests me, and he taught me a lot. It was funny. He always viewed his time with me as teaching time. So he was always, I mean, he was going for strategic things. He would, for example, he would sit on the porch and he would say, "This land is so important. You need to hold on to this land." And he would go on about things like that.
Which was a Southern tradition.
Yes.
It very much, you don't ever sell the family farm.
Right.
That's the old Southern thing. He would hold on the family farm. You know, that's the best. So he would try to instill that into you.
Right. And then he would even take me with him, even when, you know, I would get a little bored, but he thought, well, he'll learn something. So he'd be going around doing his business, and he'd take me with him, and always introduce me to people. And so, you know, I got used to being around adults and how to conduct myself.
Did your father never thought about being in politics either, did he? He just liked being a pilot. And he was a banker too, wasn't
yeah,
he?
he was a pilot and a banker, and I think the banking part really fulfilled his civic ambitions.
Was
as
it a
they
local
were.
bank there in Dallas County?
He started off farming and then got into banking in a little town called Uniontown.
Yeah, Uniontown.
What was the Planters and Merchants Bank, which then he merged into what was Central Bank at the time. And then once he got involved with Harry Brock and Central Bank, then that started leading to other opportunities. He established a bank in Tuscaloosa, ran it for a while for Central, then came to Montgomery and was president of Central Bank of Montgomery.
How did you? What do you think your most favorite tour of action was? If you had to say the place you enjoyed the most, do you like those time in Germany, or do you like?
The time in Germany was great because I had studied European history, and so finally all of these things I'd studied, it's right there, and I'm able to see firsthand the history. So there's a sense of seeing history, but then there's also a sense of making history. So inevitably, the time that you do when you're in a war and you're in combat, those are indelible moments. And so the time that I spent in Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and then the time I spent in Afghanistan, those are some of my best memories. At the same time, they were some of the most difficult challenges I faced.
Didn't you do some diplomatic work for the Air Force there in Washington?
This was a great opportunity that I had, and I felt like they really. A lot of times you get jobs that you're going, I guess I can do that, but that really doesn't seem like the best one for me. This was one where I felt like, this is the kind of stuff I love. Thank goodness they're giving me a chance to do what I love. And what I was doing was, I was the senior military official at the State Department, and also dual-hatted as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. So my job was, in the biggest sense, is to make things work between the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, and the State Department. On any one day, I might be going over to the Pentagon, I might be going over to the White House, I might be going over to Congress working an issue, but I also was traveling the world. Going to places like Vietnam, where we were working to remediate the places where we drop bombs, and to make sure that those areas are safe, because we still haven't cleaned up all of the ordnance that we dropped over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, now, when you were like working around the State Department, would you dress in a suit, or would you wear your military?
Mostly in a suit.
Even though you were an officer, you officers wore suits.
It just made it easy for me to move, because, like I said, a lot of my time was in the State Department. So by showing that I'm wearing their uniform,
right?
I'm making a gesture.
So there's no
towards
protocol
them.
you could wear.
If I were representing myself, in another sense, there was times for ceremonies, things like that. Obviously, I would be in uniform, but most of the time I was in a suit. Similarly, I had an opportunity. Again, my political background or familiarity with politics helping me out. I did what we call legislative liaison for the Air Force. So I would go over and work with Congress on issues that affected the Air Force. And we wore suits when we would be in Congress. We kind of in deference to not having it look like that we were invading Congress, I guess.
That's right. Who was your favorite? Was old Bill Nichols? He was on armed services when you did it, wasn't he?
No,
he
was
died?
Still, he had left or died, I think, before I started doing that for the Air Force.
He was a powerful armed services.
Oh, he was.
Dickinson was.
Yeah, we've traditionally in Alabama, we've had great, strong leaders in Congress.
Was Dickinson in Congress when you were alive? Was he already gone?
No, I mean, when I was young, he was in Congress, but no, he was gone by the time
Shelby was there, though.
Shelby. And I have to say, I love Senator Shelby, and has been great to me. He remembers me. He tells stories about my family, and he
had that district. He had the 7th district.
Well, one of the things that he was a state senator before he became he went to Congress.
Right.
And so he knew my grandfather.
He served with Mr. Walker.
And he always he loves to tell stories about my grandfather, which I love to hear, because you don't know everything.
So Shelby served with Givanni.
As did Governor Beasley, Jerry Beasley.
Yeah.
And they were both in he was Jerry Beasley was lieutenant governor.
Right.
When my grandfather was in the Senate, and Senator Shelby was serving as a state senator.
I remember Shelby in the state senate. He's been around a while now. Shelby's 80 years old.
Yeah.
But he's running again.
Going strong.
He'll tell you right now, the first thing he says, I'm running again re-election.
Strong leader.
Now, Shelby never really served on armed services, though. He gravitated to banking and appropriations, and you know, he may have on his first term in Congress served on armed services, but the 7th District didn't have a lot of bases. But you know something, and you probably know this, having been in the military and been around Montgomery. I was sitting on this same show talking to Mayor Todd Strange about 3 or 4 years ago, and something came about state government being cut back so much, and I made a comment to Todd Strange. I said, Todd, you know, I guess it's really hurt your city a lot that the state government's been cut back so much, because I assumed that state government was the #1 employer in Montgomery. He said, well, no, it's been hard, but it's not our biggest employer. I said, you mean Hyundai's now #1? He said, no, it's Maxwell Gunner.
Yeah.
And you know, our delegation during that Depression era, like Lister Hill and John Spartan, were really the reason that a lot of those plants were.
A lot of the bases.
A lot of the bases
came
were
here.
there. And the same's true with you know this from serving in Tyndall and Eglin. You know, people who hang around the Panhandle of Florida assume that the beach vacation tourism dollars is by far the biggest economic boom to the Panhandle. Eglin and Tyndall are the biggest employers in those areas.
Yeah, I think I was commander of a base at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. And even there, in a place where, you know, you've got all of these casinos and there's tremendous economic impact to that, billions of dollars of economic impact came from the base. So the city officials recognized that, and they were very good to us and helped us out always.
So they, even in Las Vegas, that base was
huge impact.
Walter, let me ask you this question. This may be too political, but you don't have to answer it. You know, you've been out how many years now?
I retired in January of 2014.
You just got out then?
Yeah, not
let me ask you this. The perception is that the Obama administration has not had the emphasis on military preparedness and that sort of thing. I contend that the two things that our country continues to do the best is being the best military in the world and having the best farm. I mean, we can feed our people and we can protect our people. If you can do that, you can remain superior. Do you perceive as less emphasis on making sure that we have a strong military? This is kind of a complex question. Do you sense, even in Congress, that the appropriations are diminishing?
Well, Steve, the real problem has been sequestration. I was dealing with this in my last years as a commander in the military. And sequestration, you know, which puts spending caps and, you know, you remember it was the deal that was supposed to, we won't let this happen. We'll put this deal together because if no one's going to let this happen, but then they let it happen. You know, they thought that it would automatically. So then we went into sequestration. And the problem has been is that it has really hampered our efforts at improving our military's capability and its readiness. I won't go into all the details.
So you think there has been less interest?
Well,
I mean, it's diminished.
The problem has been there isn't a political consensus on how to do this and get us out of sequestration. Remember, it was sort of like we're going to put this sword over our neck, and we know we won't let it go, but we did. We let sequestration come into effect. The Congress, the country could not come together to find a way out of that. So now we're living with the effects of sequestration still for the military. And there's been some relief here and there. Senator Shelby is, you know, he's done a good job really, as has Congresswoman Roby, in trying to lead some efforts to provide us what we need. But it doesn't get at this overall thing of sequestration, which, you know, puts big limits on what we can do to improve our military readiness.
Technically, or number of people?
No, it's in money and spending and new programs, all of these things. So every year, you know, we're faced with this again. And I can tell you that as a commander, and I speak for all of them, it took an inordinate amount of time just figuring out how you were going to get through the next month or the next 6 months with things that you were asked to do in your mission, and yet you have this thing called sequestration that is limiting, you know, what you can do and how the money can be spent, and the caps that are put on things. We need to find a way as a country to come together and find a way out of this, because you're exactly right. The number one responsibility we have is to defend our country and its interest.
We've got to protect. I think the one thing that's hurt too is the federal deficit. We've got to get a handle on that. But we've got to make sure our military is well prepared, well trained, well paid.
Absolutely.
You know, we've got to do that. We've got to protect our farm interests.
You know,
if you can feed yourself and protect yourself, you know, they can't take you over.
Coming from a state where being number one in football is always a goal, I can tell you that one of the proudest things that I had in my life was knowing that I was part of a number one team by being a member of the U.S. military.
Yeah.
And that's something I took great pride in, and I want everyone who serves in the military to have that same pride, and we need to do what we can to make sure that's the case.
Well, it's going to save our country. Let me talk quickly. We only got about 3 minutes left. Tell our viewers and explain what role you have as Vice Chancellor, what areas you're responsible for at the university, and what all areas, this area we're in right now.
Right. I've got a pretty diverse portfolio. My formal title is Senior Vice Chancellor for Advancement and Economic Development, but what it really includes is development, and that's fundraising, sponsored programs, which are the grants that we work with the faculty to get.
Who are your lieutenants in that area?
Yeah, Dr. Jean LaLiberte is head of my development.
Development,
and then Judy Fulmer is grants, so it's sponsored programs. Then I have Alumni Affairs. Faith Ward is Director of Alumni Affairs for us. I have governmental relations. Marcus Paramore is federal, state, and local, so get to do a lot of that, which is fun.
And Donna's over.
And Donna Schubert is over marketing, media relations, communications.
So that's your 5 areas.
Right.
Media, politics, development. What other 2 now? Alumni Affairs.
Alumni Affairs and grants.
Grants, right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good team.
It's a great team. It's a diverse portfolio. Keeps me busy, but all things I love to do.
Is there one you think is more important than the other one?
You know, I don't think so, because it all really, you know, comes together, and depending upon the time, everything it can be critical. And lots of the revenue that the university gets obviously comes through those various things. Obviously, government relations, you know, our state appropriation and plussing that up.
What percent of Troy's budget is state appropriation? It used to be about 50, but it's about 25
20.
now. Just down to 20.
Down to 20, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really dropped significantly. So that puts pressure on us, whether we're going for grants, whether we're going out and we're raising funds from donors and interested parties. All of that's tremendously important to us now, since only 20% of our money is coming from the state.
That's amazing. Well, Walter, our time's about up. I appreciate you being with us today. You know, this has been so illuminating for me. I've enjoyed. We've had a personal conversation, got to be personal friends over the last year and a half since you've been here, but it's been fun talking about that. We've got a great guy at Troy University now, General Walter Givan, who I guess Walter III now, isn't it? They changed the middle name.
We changed the middle name, so there are never any numbers.
Walter Givan, who came from an iconic political family here in Alabama, who is now the Vice Chancellor, Senior Vice Chancellor, here at Troy University, and we thank him for being with us today, and we thank you viewers for watching. I hope you tune again next week for This Week in Alabama Politics. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Steve. Enjoyed it.
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.